Sometimes when we're thinking about either retirement or the next chapter of our lives, we think we need a grand plan or we need to take a huge jump into the unknown. And I think it's why many of us put off transitioning into the next chapter of our lives for so long. We know that we could make positive change and spend our time, which is our most valuable commodity, giving ourselves more freedom and autonomy. But the fear of making huge fundamental change often puts us off. We know that making fundamental changes can be super scary, and not many of us feel prepared to make grand plans or take huge jumps. But here's the thing. I don't believe you need to make grand plans or take huge jumps to transition into the next chapter of your lives. Because I think experimentation, curiosity, and the ability to navigate as we go into the next chapters might be the key to actually doing it well. That's why today I want to talk about this book, Tiny Experiments by Anne-Laure Lecomte. Apologies for that really poor pronunciation, by the way, because I think this book has got the insights that we need when we're thinking about the next chapter of our life to do it well. Welcome to What Happens Next. So what if your next chapter, retirement or whatever it may be, doesn't need a grand plan? It doesn't need a dramatic leap, and it doesn't need any sort of answer that looks definitive. What if it needs something smaller, a tiny experiment? Not a massive overhaul of all of our life, not a reinvention, just small, incremental, low-risk tests that give us information about what we actually might want to do with our time in the next chapter of our lives, typically when we hit our late 50s and early 60s. Because I reckon when people ask themselves what happens next, the real problem often isn't a lack of options. We've got a massive amount of choice. We've got actually too much choice than we can handle. The scary prospect is often choosing the wrong option. So in this video, I want to talk about why tiny experiments can help you try stuff and work out whether it's the right option for you. Because there's a line I've heard from my clients plenty of times, particularly when they reach that transition point in their lives. I'm not sure my ladder is up the right wall anymore. Often my clients have spent years climbing and building their careers. They've got to a point where they're super successful from the perspective of everybody else, but something's not right in them. And often my experience is that once you start thinking about this and understanding that something needs to change, often that feeling doesn't go away. But it's interesting. A lot of people I speak to about this feeling and whose lives look absolutely brilliant from the outside often find themselves not taking action and being in two camps. Firstly, they find themselves stuck in a routine. Or they make a big jump, they make a significant choice to make change, hoping the landing is soft, but actually the landing is hard. So to give you an example, you might retire, go from 50 hours a week working in the office to 0 and find that transition is really, really tough. And actually not making positive change or making a big jump, those two options I don't think are ideal. And I believe that there's a third option. I want to talk about that third part today, inspired, as I said, by this brilliant book by Anne-Laure Lecomte, and actually a concept that's at the heart of what happens next. And that's to simply design your life in a way that a scientist or an engineer would. One small experiment at a time. Now, I'd suggest that Anne-Laure is right, but also life is what you make it. Life is often about the stories we tell ourselves about the world and how we perceive it, but it's certainly not an exam where we get to pass and fail. It can be, if we want it to be, a lab where we get to explore and experiment. Although I'm not sure I'm allowed in labs anymore after my experience as a kid with a Bunsen burner. Anne Laurie's core message is super simple, that an experimental mindset can help you pursue ambition, do the things you want to do with your life, but with a degree of flexibility, more joy, and less ability to get really upset when things go wrong than the typical approach of rigid linear goal chasing. A tiny experiment means that you might not be a runner forever, but it might be I'm going to commit to a daily habit for 30 days of running 2 minutes a day and see what happens. It's not a marriage to an identity, it's actually a low stakes trial to see whether it works for you. And that matters because the next chapter of your life isn't about the single decision. It's likely to be a journey of discovery. We talk a lot about this in the soon-to-be published What Happens Next book, funny enough. Although we call it in the book, inspired by Bill Burnett's book, Design Your Life, Rapid Low-Cost Experimentation. Interestingly, as I write this, the book is in the final stages of being edited. We'd love for you to be not only one of the first ones to read it, but if you're able to make it into London in mid-May, one of the first people to attend the book launch. So if you'd like to do this, there's a link in the comments where you can click, join the waiting list for the book, get the opportunity to attend the book launch, or you can use your phone if you're watching this on a bigger screen, click the QR code and it will take you straight to the page where you can do that. In the What Happens Next book, we talk a lot about rapid low-cost experimentation because I don't think change is a giant leap instead of just loads and loads of little jumps and loads of small tests to work out whether we're jumping in the right direction. The big thing here is to think about change we want to make in our lives in two ways. Everything we do potentially in life is a small test that provides feedback. It either tells us that we want to do more of it or less of it now. And if you enjoy something and want to do more, your experiment has won. You've tried something that you might want to incorporate into the next chapter of your life. However, if it doesn't go well, it's also been an opportunity to learn. I remember when my daughter was 15, my oldest daughter, Charlotte, who's now 22, and she said to me, Dad, I really want to be a journalist. She's doing English language at uni at the minute. She said to me, I really want to be a journalist. And I said, great. As a chartered financial planner who does some stuff with the trade industry press, I put her in touch with the editor of one of our trade magazines and said, can you support Charlotte by giving us work experience? Now, Charlotte did 2 weeks at an organisation called CityWire. They were absolutely brilliant. They got her doing editorials, recording podcasts, doing video, and then she got the opportunity to do an opinion piece at the end where she explained her perspective on financial literacy, which was really interesting. And she came back and said to me, Dad, I've learned 2 things. Number 1, I'd really love to communicate for a living. I'd love to write. I'd love to broadcast and publish. And number 2, I never want to write about money again. Now, you could judge that as a failure because she's found something that she wanted to do and something she didn't want to do, and the bit that I could have focused on is the bit she didn't want to do. I actually think it's both a win because she found something she wanted to do at work, but also a learn because she found something she didn't want to communicate or broadcast about. Because if something doesn't work, you haven't wasted time. You've just learned about how you want to spend time both now and in the future. And if you take Charlotte's example, her work experience was a way to learn about how she wants to spend her time. But at 16 and at 60, the principle still applies. The things that you might want to be doing over the next 10 years are fundamentally different. But experimenting with different stuff allows you to work out what that stuff should be. In the book, in the upcoming What Happens Next book, I tell a story about an experience I had in the summer of 2025. We, as a family, really like the idea of getting a camper van because we love the mobility and flexibility it gave us. And in the summer, we took a month, travelled around the UK coast, Wales and Scotland, in particular the beautiful North Coast 500. If you haven't been, you've definitely got to go. And we did it for a month in a camper van. Here's what we learned. Love the British countryside, love the British coast. Camper van living permanently isn't for us. Having 4 people and a dog for an elongated period of time meant that it probably didn't work as well as it should have done. However, what we did, instead of buying a camper van, we leased one for them for a month. And that gave us the freedom and flexibility to have an experiment with that sort of life without making a 2-footed commitment. The result, great emotions and a clear insight, but the fact that camper van life wasn't for us made me really glad that we took an experiment and rented a camper van as opposed to buying one and taking a big jump. And that's the power for me of a tiny experiment. You get clarity without getting trapped. You get to try making change without making any permanent promises. You see, big goals often trigger perfectionism. We start worrying about what would happen if it all goes wrong. Experiments actually lower the bar and can allow us to relax a bit more about the outcome. There's also a really interesting philosophical insight into why experimentation is definitely worth considering. You see, Aristotle's idea of eudaimonia is about flourishing in our lives. It's not about what we own or what we achieve, it's about what we continue to do with our lives. Now, clearly, Aristotle never used the phrase tiny experiments or low-cost experimentation, but he did emphasise action over abstraction, taking action and learning by doing as opposed to just deciding, and allowing our characters to emerge gradually by trying new stuff, understanding that life at its core is uncertain, and emphasising the importance of lifelong learning and curiosity. Because the concept of tiny experiments fits that ancient wisdom really well. So, how might we use tiny experiments to live the life we want? Let's start by asking ourselves a question. Not what should I do with the next 30 years of my life? It's too big. It's not practical enough to actually take action. But let's try this. What one experience have I enjoyed recently that I'd like to do a bit more of? Or what did I used to love spending time doing that I really miss? Now, when you're thinking about designing a tiny experiment, I'd suggest you make it 3 things. Small, it only takes a limited time every day, week or month. Time limited, you only experiment for a period of time, that's a month or 3 months. And low cost, it's reversible if you need it to be and doesn't use too much of your resources. Some practical examples might be, for 2 weeks I'll volunteer 1 hour a week just to see how I feel after. For 10 days I'm going to write 300 words each morning in my journal just for me. Or for 2 weeks I'm going to invite one person, just come out for a walk and a coffee and a chat every week. Next, you can decide how it went. And I'd suggest that you don't ask the question, did it succeed? But how did I feel when I was doing it? How did the time pass differently? Would I do this again? And what would I change, even in a tiny little way, to make the experience better last time? And particularly, if you didn't enjoy it, what did I learn about myself or the activity by doing this? Now, I think there's a really powerful journal loop you can use in terms of this. And I'd suggest that every couple of weeks, in whatever you use for your journal, you take a few minutes to ask, what experiments did I try in that fortnight? What did I learn about myself? What did I do that made me feel great? And where did I do that made me feel misaligned? By asking those questions, it gives you the ability to actually get closer to the life you want to live, because then you're working out what actually really helps you live the life you want as opposed to the life you don't. So if you're feeling a bit stuck, here's my recommended next step. Pick one tiny experiment for the next 7 days. If you want some accountability, feel free to put what tiny experiment you're going to do in the comments. And while you're there, if you like this video and if you're not subscribed already, subscribe to this channel. It really helps us help more people. And then simply ask at the end of that experiment, what did I learn? Because the next chapter of our lives typically doesn't arrive fully formed and ready to live. It'll arrive as a pattern. It'll arrive as tiny experiments designed to help us work out what that pattern looks like. And it will work for you by trying stuff, understanding what you're going to learn from it, and building your life moving forward. I'd certainly recommend you pick up Tiny Experiments by Anne-Laurie Lecompte because it's definitely worth reading. And if you'd want your next video to help you navigate the next chapter of your life, this video is about questions you can ask yourself to think about navigate the next chapter of your life. And this video, if you're looking for some really practical tiny experiments you might want to try, contains 7 adventures you might want to try when you're thinking about what happens next. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you on the channel soon.